Welcome, anatomy, to the urinary system. So we're going to learn about pee-pee. That's right, urine. Urine that gets its name from what the system is named, urinary. It's a very quick, smaller unit. We'll probably only take about 2 parts video. We'll do a couple weeks. It's pretty nice. It's mixed in here with your ACT. We can kind of come and go from it as we please. So anyway, let's get it knocked out. All right, the urinary system. As you can tell from the diagram, not super sophisticated in terms of having a lot of organs, a lot of different tissues and things like that, but still very complicated in the way that it functions. Okay? This diagram, of course, there's a quiz on it. You'll see it on your exam, all that good stuff. And we'll talk a little more in depth about each part as we go through the notes. In your body, I always like to say your body's very, very efficient. And it is. It does a good job of making use of the resources it has the best way it knows how. But there are some waste byproducts. There's some things that are let off as your body functions. Even the cells themselves produce a variety of waste that if they built up in your body, it become toxic. Think about your home. If you never took the trash out, let's say, eventually it would start spilling over from the trash can. It would fill up your kitchen or wherever your trash can's at. Eventually it would start piling up. It would stink in. It would, attract varmints, things like that. And eventually it could become the point where you couldn't live in the house anymore. Same thing about your cells. Yes, it's a little bit at a time, a little bit of wastes at a time. But if you leave it building up, then eventually it's going to kill you. You're not going to be able to live in your body anymore. The urinary system, along with the digestive system, of course, does a great job of removing these waste products. The urinary system consists of 2 kidneys, and kidneys should be what you think about when you think about the urinary system. They're the primary active organs, and we'll look at those in a little bit. There's 2 tubes called the ureters that run from the kidneys down to the bladder. We've all probably heard of the bladder. Princess Tiny Bladder is a nickname I have for a friend of mine who has to go pee every 30 minutes. You probably thought, oh, somebody, we were wrestling and somebody hit me in the bladder and I peed all over myself. So the bladder holds urine, as you can kind of decipher from those 2 terms. And then you've got this tubular urethra. Both male and females, we'll get into some of those differences probably in part 2 of the notes, but we both, male and female, both have a urethra. So same organs in the urinary system. One of them's urethra is a little longer than the other. So let's talk about the kidneys, and this is where we'll spend the bulk of today. They're oftentimes called bean-shaped organs, and it's a fitting description. They're reddish brown. They're located on the back side of a person, on either side of the vertebrae, on either side of the spine. You have those deep muscles in your back. It's what you might pull sometimes if you're going to hurt your back. Right underneath there is your kidneys. Compared to some other organs, they are very close to the surface. Think of your intestines and things like that. You have abdominal muscles, and some of us got a little layer of adipose tissue there that they're a little deeper down. The kidneys are right there. If you ever watch like boxing and things like that, or MMA, you might hear talk of hit them in the kidney punch. If you hit somebody right in the lower back, it can cause some severe pain. And they're real close to the surface, so they're kind of susceptible to injury. They're surrounded by connective and fat that holds them all in place. So they're not like attached to a bone or anything like that. Just that softer tissue holds it together. Anytime you see the term renal, R-E-N-A-L, it's talking about the kidneys. So we're going to see renal in a bunch of different things. You always need to equate the 2. Renal has to do with kidneys. The renal sinus is this opening that comes right in here to the kidney. So we have our bean-shaped organ here, and we have this opening where things come in. You'll also hear the sinus called the hilum. And this is the passage for nerves, blood vessels, lymph vessels, and the ureters to all come in. So everything coming in one place. You can see the ureter here, your blood vessels, both an artery and a vein, which we'll talk about more, all enter in right there in the renal sinus. 2 major regions of the kidney. One is the renal medulla. The renal medulla is the innermost part of it. Kind of see it here, the pink. These are composed of tissue called renal pyramids. These are groups of cells. There's some nephrons, as we're about to show here, and then just some connective tissues. But the renal medulla is the inner part, and the renal cortex is the outer shell surrounding the medulla. Okay, so the medulla and the cortex. Here's some brain terminology coming in here, right? So we know it's not just brain terminology, it's actually location of things. Your cerebral cortex is the outermost part of your brain. The medulla oblongata is a structure inside the brain, inner workings of the brain. The nephron. The nephron is essentially the functional unit of the kidney. It's what does a job. It's what is going to take in blood and filter it through. I forgot to mention this in the very beginning, especially for you folks who are on quarantine. Where does urine come from? It was a question I posed to our class, one day this week. Where does urine come from? A lot of people equate the urinary system and the digestive system as just like working together, because why? We pee and we poop, right? We go to the bathroom, and we typically do both of those in some order, fashion. But they're not equated with each other. The only real overlap that they have is, remember, in the digestive system, the large intestines pull out or absorb any water, supposed to be any water that's left over after nutrients have been taken out of the chyme that comes out of our stomach, enters in our small intestine, pulls out nutrients, then it goes in the large intestine, it pulls out water, and hopefully we have a nice semi-solid feces, right? That water gets absorbed into our bloodstream. From there, our blood gets filtered, you can kind of think of it that way, in the kidneys. The kidneys are what pulls out any excess water. It pulls out any waste products that our cells had given off, and it's entered into our bloodstream. So they're not super closely related. I'm saying I have 2 children, little children, so pee-pee. Urine comes from blood. That's where it comes from. So pretty interesting tidbit there that a lot of people don't understand. Anyway, the nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. About 1 million nephrons in each kidney. You watched a video hopefully by now that showed you a little bit more about the nephrons, how it takes blood in. It runs through this system of tubes and ducts. It goes down this long strand here. And some people don't like the term, but it does filter our blood. It pulls out, it allows any excess water and all the waste products to exit the blood, and gives it a system to remove it from our body. And our blood, meanwhile, leaves the kidneys and continues functioning or flowing through our body. So the nephron, we're not going to get deep into it unless you're looking to become a renal specialist or in the medical field. You're probably not going to need to know much about nephrons. Some of you hopefully will go in that direction. Kidneys. So let's talk about what it does. It helps maintain homeostasis. Remember, homeostasis is a state of normalcy, a state that our body wants to be in. And it does this by regulating extracellular fluid. In other words, it pulls out excess water and liquids that may be in our body. It also is going to it's going to filter our blood. It's going to pull out all those waste products that we mentioned on like slide 3 that are left over from our cells doing their normal job. And we're going to look at some of those waste here in a second. You see the other function of kidneys down there. We're not going to get too much into those. Regulates salt levels, activates vitamin D, secretes a hormone. Anyway, renal blood vessels. You hopefully by this point understand the difference in arteries and veins. Arteries, of course, are moving away from the heart. Veins are moving to the heart. So think about what we see here. Renal arteries, they're moving away from the heart. They're going out to the different parts of the body, including the kidney. So this is typically oxygen-rich blood, but it does take in oxygen to maintain, its normalcy, its homeostasis for the kidney. But the real thing it's doing is bringing that blood in to filter it through these nephrons. The renal arteries come from the abdominal aorta. Think about that's remember the aorta is very large. Think about why that's important. The kidneys need to get a lot of blood to it, right? It needs to be able to filter blood very quickly, very efficiently, and get those waste and extra water out of our body. The renal veins, there's as much blood's coming into the kidneys, pretty much the same amounts leaving, minus some fluids. So it's going to join the inferior vena cava on its way back to the heart. Right? And the vena cava is the largest vein in the body. Sometimes people ask, well, you hear about kidney transplants. Somebody donating a kidney. It's kind of an interesting way that they do that. If you have the two diseased kidneys here, they're not fully functioning. Of course, we're going to need, you can live with one kidney. You're just not as well set up as you would be if you had two, but you can still, carry on a normal life. So you could donate a kidney to somebody if you have, the same criteria, blood type and all that good stuff. So anyway, one day when your old teacher Coach Hicks needs a kidney, I'll be coming to calling on one of y'all. Anyway, if they're diseased, they'll actually take the transplanted kidney and suture it in to the renal artery and renal vein. So it's kind of neat, and they'll actually suture in a ureter, as we'll see in a minute. So you just kind of tack it into the body. They push some things around and make room for it. By everything I've read, they just kind of leave the diseased kidneys in there unless they're at a point of being toxic to the body. If they're just not functioning, they're just kind of dead space. No need in cutting these blood supplies and possibly leading to further injury. So what is urine made out of? It's 95% water, mostly water. I'm sure you've seen Bear Grylls or some other survivalists say, you can just drink your urine. Yeah, I guess if you're about to die, it'll keep you alive for a little bit more, but you don't want these toxic things back in your body. Urea and uric acid are what we're talking about, the toxic. We'll look at those in a minute. The volume of urine daily is somewhere between about half a liter and 2.5 liters. The average is about 1.5 liters. So think about a 2-liter Coke. 3/4 of that bottle is how much urine you make every day. Now, factors do play into this: how much fluid you intake, your environmental temperature, your body temperature. If you sweat a lot, there's a lot of water secreting from the body that urine don't have to pull out. So it differs depending on who you are. Urine, waste, excess water removed from the blood. Once the kidneys get that out of the blood, it goes into the ureters. And ureters, remember, these tubes that carry urine down to the bladder. We'll look at the bladder tomorrow. What is urea? It's a byproduct of when amino acids, which are the protein building blocks, they get broken down. I gave you it in other words here. When proteins break down in our cells, it's a nitrogen-rich waste that is left off. It enters into the bloodstream, and it needs to be taken out. So that's what our kidneys do. They pull out this urea. If left unchecked, urea can be very toxic in the body. Uric acid is also a product of metabolism. So as our body burns energy through cellular respiration, this is a waste product. For you chemistry nerds, there's the diagram showing what uric acid is. If uric acid gets built up in your body, you can develop something called gout. You typically see gout affecting the feet and the hands. It's a type of arthritis, so it affects those joints. Most people would have experienced gout in the feet. It's insoluble, meaning that it can't dissolve in water, and that's why it gets lodged in these joints. And there's just restating. The big toe is commonly affected. So uric acid actually forms these crystals. Excuse me. So urine elimination, once urine passes from the kidneys, it goes through the ureters and down to the bladder. Now, as we'll see later, the bladder is simply a balloon-type sac that can swell up, and it does nothing really more than just hold the urine. It stores it. If we didn't have a bladder, that would pretty much suck. We'd constantly be peeing all the time. We'd have to go, as quick as our kidneys filtered out things, we'd have to go, excrete the urine from our body. Our bladder enables us to carry on a somewhat normal life. From the bladder, we'll learn it travels out another tube called the urethra. Those are things for a different day. That is the end of part 1 of our notes. Please feel free to ask me questions if you're in class. Just, don't be scared to come up. If you're online watching these things, shoot me an email. We can discuss these a little more. Make sure you take your quiz that's attached to this and also any other assignments. Happy peeing.